had an affair while he was caring for my sick dad. My husband's revenge destroyed my family. My name is Maya, female 29, and just a few weeks ago my life came crumbling down around me. If you told me a few months ago what would happen between us, I would have called you crazy, but it all happened. It all fell apart before I could do a thing to stop it. For some context, I've been baking for as long as I can remember. Some of my earliest memories are of helping my mom in the kitchen and getting flour all over myself. It was something that had become almost second nature to me as a kid and continued to bring me peace of mind in my older years. There was something so comforting and therapeutic about turning your mind off and whipping together predetermined quantities of ingredients. Despite knowing that my passion lay in the culinary, I still tried to go for what I thought would be a more reasonable career option when I finished high school, and that was how I ended up going to college for sociology. It wasn't something I wanted to study or something that I liked, but I'd seen it as a way to take my life more seriously. After 3 years of struggling and hoping I was doing literally anything else, I dropped out and moved back to hometown, where I used a loan from my parents to finally follow my dreams and open my own bakery. It wasn't easy at all, and it wasn't until my first year running the place that I realized that I'd had a romanticized version of what my life would be like in my head. It turned out that owning your own bakery wouldn't be all sunshine and croissants, but actually waking up at 3 a.m. to knead dough until your arms were sore, but still, I wouldn't have had it any other way. It was hard, but it was worth it. Despite how much I loved it, 2 years in, and I was absolutely exhausted. I never knew that owning your own business meant never actually taking a day off and never having any time to yourself. I was rarely ever not in the bakery, and my personal life almost seemed to fizzle out under the weight of all the work I had to do. So when my friends and my parents recommended that I take a break and go on a trip somewhere, I was stubborn, but not that hard to convince. At first, I really didn't want to go. I had barely thought of anything but recipes, much less having fun in 2 years, and it felt strange to leave something I cared so much about in the hands of another person. But they made good points in their arguments, and I really did need the break. It was on this getaway trip with my friends that I met Gabriel, male 30. He worked at the hotel we were staying at, not as a receptionist or an attendant of some kind or anything, but as a general manager. I would learn later on that he worked for a hotel chain and that he was overseeing the expansion of the one we were staying at. I spoke to him for the first time at the hotel restaurant. I'd woken up early, already used to being an early riser, and had gone down for some breakfast while my friends slept in. He walked right up to my table and asked how the meal was. Right away I could tell that he was someone important. There was just this way he carried himself, this natural, easygoing confidence that oozed off of him. I remember responding with a poor attempt at a joke, and to my surprise he laughed. What surprised me even more was when he asked if he could join me. I was hesitant. He was a stranger, and my friends would come down any minute, but there was just something about him, something that drew me in and had me saying yes before I could think too much about it. We talked about ourselves and our work. It all felt so easy, the conversation. It didn't feel like he was a stranger at all, and maybe that was because of how naturally charming he was. I don't know, but there was just this instant connection. We chatted until I spotted my friends making their way toward me, and he politely introduced himself to them before saying his goodbyes. He visited me that night once he was done with work. I'd let it slip during breakfast what room I was in, which probably wasn't the smartest thing to do, but I was already well on my way to developing a crush. We took a walk on the beach close to the hotel, and we talked for what felt like hours before he asked if I'd like to go somewhere with him the next day. Like with other things when it came to him, I found myself saying yes. The next day he took me on a tour of the island. He'd been there for a few months at that point, so he knew his way around. We spent the day seeing a few sights and doing exciting things like zip-lining. I was too scared to go, but I watched him do it, before he took me to get some of the best food I'd ever eaten. The whole thing was a surprise. It definitely wasn't what I imagined when I said yes to going on this trip, and after we shared a kiss that night when he dropped me off at the hotel, I thought that would be it. I thought that we'd had a fun day, but that he wouldn't be interested in more, but Gabriel was just full of surprises. He would wait for me at the breakfast bar, and after we got something to eat, we would spend the day together. We quickly formed a kind of routine, and soon enough we were spending every day of my trip together. Of course, my friends felt a bit slighted since they'd wanted to spend time with me, but they were all so happy for me, some more than others, because their ultimate goal was to get me to relax and have some fun. When I got home, I figured that would be the end of it. A decent memory, a week's worth of lovely dates and kisses, and nothing more. But a week later, I got an email. He'd remembered the name of my bakery from our conversation and reached out through my business contact form. I probably should have ignored it. We couldn't realistically have any kind of relationship, but I didn't. We talked a lot. At first it was occasional emails, then it became weekly calls, then texts. He was traveling for work almost constantly, bouncing from one hotel to the next, so most of what we had in those early days existed through short bursts of communication and the occasional very rare and very quick meetup. It should have felt like a chore, essentially dating someone who was so unavailable, but it didn't, not in the beginning anyway. I clung to those little moments we got to spend together. Gabriel was different from anyone I'd dated before. There was no ego with him, no performance. He didn't make big promises. He just showed up when he could and called as frequently as his job would allow, which eventually became every night. After about a year of back and forth, he moved to my city, took a position at a nearby hotel under the same chain. He said he was tired of living out of suitcases and that he wanted to build something real. I just about fainted when he walked into the bakery one day and almost cried when he told me that he wouldn't be leaving in a few hours, that he was here to stay. He moved into my apartment. It was small and noisy, but he never complained. We made it work. We got engaged about 6 months after he settled in. The wedding was simple and intimate, with just our family and friends. I cried when my dad walked me down the aisle and cried again when he read his vows. Being married almost felt easy. We were just so in tune with each, the other side of each other's coin in a way. Him working from home that first year that we were married helped us grow and helped our relationship flourish. I spent most of my time at the bakery, but that didn't matter, because some days he'd come down and stay with me. He was hopeless when it came to baking, but his presence was comfort enough. We spent all our nights together, curled up in each other's arms. I couldn't believe that I'd found the love of my life on some random trip. I couldn't believe I'd been so lucky. But then he got promoted. He became regional director for the company, which meant travel was back on the table. Not constantly, but often enough. A few days here and there, sometimes a week or two if a hotel was having issues or launching something new. He always tried to check in. He'd call at night, ask about my day, and remind me not to skip dinner. And I was fine with it. I told myself I was fine with it. I knew what his job required. I knew what I'd signed up for. I tried to tell myself that it would be just like when we first started dating, that I'd handled it back then and could handle it now. But then my dad got sick. He'd always been in and out of the hospital. Something was usually wrong, but this time we weren't lucky enough for his visit to last just a few days. It started with a fall, then a hospital visit, then a diagnosis we didn't see coming. Complications, tests, medications that made everything worse before they made anything better. It was horrible and exhausting. My mom passed away when I was young, and my siblings didn't live back home, so all the responsibility of care fell on my shoulders. I was at the hospital most days, mornings at the bakery, evenings at his bedside. It nearly broke me apart, watching my dad like that. It's an awful pain, watching someone you love slowly deteriorate and fade away. When he was just diagnosed, I tried to keep things light and make him happy, so we would spend our time together playing board games, he loved those, and calling my siblings, but eventually he got too weak to play and too tired to talk to anyone. The few strings of words he would mutter to me when I got to his room seemed to zap whatever energy he had. I spent my nights crying and hoping for him to get better. I couldn't believe that the strong man who raised me was the one laying in that hospital bed, disheveled and constantly exhausted. Gabriel stepped up at first. He skipped a trip to New Orleans to check on another hotel and came straight from the airport to the hospital one night. He sat with me through the worst of it when Dad had a seizure and we thought we were going to lose him. He came back to the apartment and took care of things I'd forgotten and neglected. He cleaned, bought groceries, did the laundry that had been piling up for weeks. That night I clung to him like he would disappear in my sleep, scared to let him go and hoping with all my heart that he would stay again this time. But eventually, work called. He had to oversee the opening of a new hotel, a big one in Europe. He didn't want to go, but it was a big deal. It was one of their biggest properties yet. He tried to stay with me for as long as he could, stretching out the days so I wouldn't be alone again, but eventually it was time for him to go. I told him it was fine and that our love could survive the constant distance. I really wanted him to stay, for him to be with me, but I knew that if I pushed it or forced him to, he would grow to resent me. He left eventually. He kissed me goodbye and told me to call if anything happened, that he would come rushing no matter what. I stood in the doorway and watched his car pull out of the lot. Then I turned around and went right back into the hospital. I didn't have the time to feel my devastation or acknowledge the deep loneliness that was building in me. I had to take care of my dad. It had been a few months since his diagnosis, and since I'd spoken to anyone that wasn't his doctor or that nurse that gave him his medication, but then I met Victor. He was also a nurse, my dad's new one, but he was different. He wasn't mechanical in the way the other nurse had been. He was friendly and asked questions about my dad like he was trying to get to know him. He remembered little things, like how my dad liked his pillows adjusted, which foods he liked, even though my dad didn't complain about any of them, and that I always brought a book with me but never read it. He brought me water without asking and talked to me about my dad's condition with sympathy. It started with something small. One day, while he was bringing in my father's pills, I noticed a book on his tray. After giving my dad his meds, and he'd fallen asleep, he approached me and held the book out to me. He told me that he noticed I'd been reading, or at least trying to read the same book for weeks now, and this one would probably be much more interesting. That was the start of a kind of friendship between us. We shared casual conversations while he checked vitals and got meals together at the hospital cafeteria. We grew pretty close in a matter of weeks. He was a little different than Gabriel. He was kind of rough around the edges and didn't have that easy confidence. He was big with a slightly intimidating look, but a softie in the end. Eventually, my dad's condition became more stable, and he got some of his energy back, so much so that I didn't have to sleep at the hospital every night. The day I was set to essentially move back into my own apartment, Victor collected my number. He said that it was in case something happened, and to give me updates on my dad's health, so I agreed. Then our easy conversation quickly continued when he started texting me. Just updates on my dad's condition at first, like he said, but then he started checking in. He would ask how I was and how things were going at the bakery. Sometimes he would even ask me to tell him about my day, and we would exchange stories about the stress we were experiencing. And those conversations eventually progressed into little comments, compliments, moments that didn't feel appropriate, but I didn't push them away. They felt good to hear, and I decided to be selfish by not saying anything. When he started coming to the bakery was when I should have broken things off, but I couldn't bring myself to. His presence became comforting. I knew he was doing it just to see me, and not because my croissants were too good like he'd claimed, but still I didn't push him away. It was nice to have someone again. He would walk me to my car after I visited my dad, and he would bring me coffee because I'd mentioned that I was tired. He never tried anything, and he wasn't pushy. He was just there, a constant presence in my life, much like how Gabriel had been in those first few years. Victor and I grew closer and closer with each day, and I let it happen. The night we kissed, it wasn't planned. We were sitting in his car, talking. This was something that we sometimes did, and I was ranting about how overwhelmed and burnt out I felt. He reached for my hand, and his thumb rubbed circles on the back of my hand as I spoke. The more we continued talking, the more we leaned in, and eventually there was barely any space between us. When he kissed me, I didn't stop him. I kissed him back. It happened again and again, not every night, not even most nights, but enough. We were a mess of stolen kisses in his car or mine or in the hospital, and eventually those kisses turned into something more when he walked me home from the bakery one night, since it wasn't that far from my apartment. We'd paused in the doorway, both of us unsure. He knew I was married, and I knew that it would be a mistake, but when he reached for me, I couldn't pull away. I justified the affair that followed in so many ways to make myself feel better. I told myself that it was temporary, and that it was only happening because I was lonely and in such a vulnerable place. I told myself that Gabriel would never have to know, and that for all I knew, he was probably going out with a range of European women while he'd been away. Soon enough, my subpar justifications turned to anger. Anger at myself and anger at Gabriel. I blamed him for what I'd done and couldn't understand why he wouldn't just keep staying with me. He already had more money than he knew what to do with. Why did he have to take this job when he knew I was struggling? When he'd seen the evidence of how badly I was doing in each dirty shirt he'd picked up, and with each dirty dish he'd cleaned. It felt like I was spiraling, and eventually I had to stop my affair with Victor and put in a request for a new nurse. The guilt and self-hatred it was causing grew to be too much, and I couldn't handle it anymore. With Victor gone, my anger toward Gabriel dwindled into longing. I missed him more than anything, and I hated the distance between us. When he called one night and told me that he would be coming back for a few months now that the hotel was open, I had cried because of how happy I was. But then I began to feel guilty again because of how I'd betrayed him. In the end, I'd hoped that I could have it all, that I could keep my husband and my secrets, that he would never have to know about what I'd done, but I was wrong. I'd done something horrible, and it would ruin everything. It all seemed fine when Gabriel came back. He came straight to the bakery from the airport, and I practically tackled him when he walked through the doors. I hugged him until all the flour on me had been sufficiently transferred to his expensive suit, and I didn't even realize when I'd started crying. After work, we stopped by the apartment to change before he took me out for a nice dinner to celebrate his coming back. We spent that night in each other's arms like we used to, and the next few weeks that he was with me were the best of my life. Everything was perfect. Our relationship had never been better, and my dad was recovering. It all felt too good to be true. I should have known that it was the calm before the storm, that I couldn't escape my mistake. Weeks into Gabriel being back, I noticed that he started to act strangely. He turned distant and became withdrawn. He was barely at the apartment, and he stopped coming by the bakery, which was strange because he'd moved to my hometown for me. He didn't have any friends there or really know anyone. I couldn't understand why he was suddenly acting so weird or what I could have done to cause it. It all became clear, though, one night when I went over to the hospital after closing up the bakery. I wanted to see my dad since he was scheduled to be released in a few weeks, and I felt more comfortable going since Victor had long since been replaced. For some reason, I don't know if it was intuition or my own guilt, I had such a bad feeling as I walked toward my dad's room. I heard voices coming from inside, but I just assumed it was the new nurse giving him his medicine, so I walked in. I was surprised to find Gabriel sitting by my dad's bedside. I didn't think anything of it until I put my bag down and noticed that they both looked upset, angry even. I asked what was wrong and watched as Gabriel pulled out a small folder. Without saying anything to me, he tossed it on the chair, and I sat down to open it with confusion. I didn't understand why he was treating me like that, or why my dad hadn't said a word since I walked in, until I opened the folder and looked at what was inside. It was evidence. Texts and pictures detailing my affair with Victor. I was shocked and horrified, and I was confused at how Gabriel had gotten them in the first place. I glanced up at him, already trying to think of a way to explain myself, but he spoke before I could. He told me that one of my friends had noticed that I was cheating when she'd followed me out of the bakery and watched me get in Victor's car. She then proceeded to take pictures when she could, and even went as far as to screenshot texts between me and him when I was working. It made sense why she would do something like that. She barely hid the fact that she'd been jealous of my relationship with Gabriel, and the way he'd always supported me. I know she must have been all too happy when she caught me with Victor. I'd finally given her a reason that wasn't jealousy, and a way to break me and Gabriel up. I tried to explain myself and beg him, tried to get him to understand that it had only happened because I was lonely, and he'd been away for so long, that it had meant nothing in the end, and that I'd ended the relationship months ago, but Gabriel didn't want to hear it. That was when my father finally spoke up and told me that Gabriel had shown him everything, and that he couldn't believe that I'd get entangled with his nurse of all people while he was fighting for his life. The next words out of his mouth completely broke me. He told me that he didn't want to see me, and that I shouldn't bother coming to pick him up when he was discharged. I was devastated, and I tried to explain that I was the only one who could pick him up. But then Gabriel chimed in and told me that he'd already informed my siblings of everything, and that my sister was flying back home to take over the responsibility of caring for our dad. I knew without having to ask that my siblings, too, wouldn't want to speak to me after what Gabriel had told them. My dad had always had upstanding morals and had raised us in that way. I knew that he and my siblings wouldn't be able to overlook what I'd done, not for a while. Gabriel then added salt to the wound by telling me that he couldn't believe that he'd married me and that he wanted a divorce. He then informed me that he would come by during the week to pick up his things. He barely even looked at me throughout all of it. He stormed out after that, and I followed after him, begging him for us to talk and for him to reconsider, but he acted like I wasn't even talking to him. It's been a week since then, and I still haven't heard a word from him. He didn't even come back for his stuff. I've been taking off the visitors list for my dad, and my siblings have refused to speak to me. The news of what I'd done spread around town fast, and I've become something of a pariah. The gossip and judgment has cost me a lot of business. Reputation is everything in small towns, and mine has been ruined. I've been anxiously waiting for the divorce papers to come in, but they haven't yet. I don't know whether to be hopeful or scared. My calls and texts to Gabriel don't go through, so I know he blocked me. My life is practically over, my marriage is all but ruined, my business is going downhill, and my family wants nothing to do with me. How do I fix any of this? How did I get my life and my family back?